Welcome to First Mile's Climate Heroes. I'm your host, Bruce Bratley, founder of recycling company First Mile. On this show, we meet and learn from the climate heroes who are building solutions right now to tackle climate change. More and more businesses are looking for solutions to help them achieve a net zero carbon status. This has led to a surge in tools for measuring our carbon footprint, along with new low carbon products and services. But even the greenest of companies are left with emissions that can't be avoided today, and a growing number are offsetting their impact with voluntary carbon credits. Today's guest on First Mile's Climate Heroes is helping its customers reduce their carbon impact and buy credits to offset the balance of their emissions that can't be reduced today. Elliot Coad is co-founder and CEO of Ecologi, and I'm delighted to welcome him to the show. Elliot, welcome to First Mile's Climate Heroes.
Bruce, thank you very much for inviting me to it.
So, Elliot, net zero is an emergency response to the climate emergency. And one of the tools that we're using, first of all, we need to measure our impact as an organization, as an individual or a business, try and reduce that impact as much as possible. But getting to zero or net zero is quite often just not achievable today. And that's sort of where carbon credits come in, is sort of my understanding of it. So from an environmental perspective, what is it that they're addressing? Because it's, for some people, it might be sort of quite a nebulous concept that you can buy something, a carbon credit on the Ecologi website, and then it results in a project to reduce emissions, perhaps on the other side of the world.
That's exactly it. So it's a big subject, and it comes with a lot of history, and we'll probably tap into some of that history down the road. But what's the current role of carbon credits? Well, as you say, if you're a business, your climate strategy starts with looking at your own carbon footprint, making reductions, and the boilerplate climate strategy is to make those reductions as far as you can, and then offset the residual emissions by funding some project potentially around the world, the other side of it, like renewables or tree planting, for example. What we've seen is that it could take a company decades to do everything they possibly can to reduce their carbon emissions. And we've all faced it, where when we look at your own carbon emissions and you go, okay, there's some real nice quick wins, and some harder stuff to do, and there's some things where I'm just not even sure how I'd begin to understand how I could remove those emissions from my carbon footprint. And what if we only look down that avenue, then we're missing out over the potential decades that it takes us to get there, the opportunity of funding the available quality climate solutions that are out in the world right now. So there's about 80, maybe 90 kind of classically registered climate solutions that are ready to go, that are ready to be funded. And if they did get funded, they could add decades and decades to our carbon budget. But money isn't flowing into them. And we could do with the extra carbon budget. And so this is for Ecologi, our initial space where we wanted to exist. Allow businesses, especially, and individuals to start funneling money into those high quality climate solutions while they're making reductions, because we don't have this kind of either or kind of ability to solve climate. We have to throw everything into the mix, and with those solutions that are ready to go, we want to see them supported as fast as possible. As you say, it has to be that balance. You have to be looking at your footprint. And also what we've seen, we've got 19,000 businesses who are working with us now. Quite a lot of businesses aren't thinking about their carbon footprint yet. They're quite early on the journey. They might just want to plant a tree, or they might just they've heard of direct air capture, carbon capture, and they just want to do a little bit of that. And that's often a bit of a gateway, an entryway, and go, oh, I did that. And then more often than not, those little small actions, we can nudge them into the next action, and then eventually ladder up into, as you say, a full-blown net zero strategy.
And what are the examples of some of these projects that are sort of underfunded, the 90 projects that need funding now that we could use carbon credits to fund? Give us some examples.
Yeah, so carbon credits works best in certain areas where it's a bit easier to quantify. Some projects are massive solutions, but they're harder to get money into those projects and then quantify their impact. For example, reducing food waste is a huge opportunity. But in terms of the carbon credits, actually showing how many tons of carbon emissions you've avoided, or methane in this case, actually really difficult. So there's a real heartland of carbon credits, and that's in the renewable energy. So helping accelerate wind and solar being rolled out across the world in countries that desperately need it, to reduce their reliance on coal, especially. It could be reforestation or preventing deforestation. So if we need to be able to tip the balance from the price of a tree being cut down and replaced by potentially farmland or growing palm oil, we need the cost of an acre of that rainforest to be better served, left standing. And that's how the carbon credits can help, because it can be more valuable than seeking alternatives, which are much more destructive. There's community projects. For example, we fund loads of community projects that, for example, just picking out one, helps water wells. For example, in East Africa, these water wells are installed by charities often, allows communities to get clean access to water. Up until without that, they'd have to boil up dirty water sources, probably from places that are unsanitary. But that boiling means that you're cutting down local forests, to kind of get all the charcoal. But those wells fall into disrepair. And it seems like a really long way to kind of get back to the original climate problem. But if we support projects that go and repair those water wells, then there's a whole lot less deforestation in the local area and a lot less indoor air pollution and all sorts of co-benefits, as we say. But there's myriad ways of, getting money into supporting incredible projects.
And can carbon credits only be issued from sort of the global south developing nations, or are we now sort of in a situation where we can quantify and issue carbon credits from projects that might be happening in the heart of the UK or Scotland or something?
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes with a price premium. There's just the opportunity where the kind of bang for your buck, as it were. It often allows the global south to essentially receive funding that it just wouldn't otherwise normally. And so from a humanitarian and societal point of view, funneling money into poorer nations is generally really well received, as you can imagine. As you can also understand that companies don't just want, their money just going to lots of different countries. Maybe they want money to go into the countries that they're selling, where their customers are. And so, we work with in the UK and up in Scotland, we do a lot of our tree planting too. And so, having climate action on your doorstep, it has a premium, but it's also very, very well received. But we don't want to just have it focus in one place. We want it all around the planet, hundreds of countries, all transitioning to a cleaner, greener world.
And in a very short time, amazingly, 19,000 businesses you're working with already, and I'm sure thousands of direct-to-consumers as well. What is Ecologi, and how does it all work? You've got a beautiful website, which is totally useless for a podcast. So tell us all about it.
Okay. Well, it started off with the idea is to, how can we inspire just those kind of small actions to ladder up into more actions? Just, if you're okay, just for a few minutes, just going back to how it started. At the time, about 4 years ago, I was in a technology job, creating products. But I just didn't have that kind of job satisfaction. I've been keenly aware of the kind of the level of the crisis that is with climate and nature. And I was on the way into work. I was just buying yet another coffee, fancy coffee. I do it every day. And, I'm in a privileged position to not really kind of see how much money I spend on coffee. It's still an extraordinary amount. But I was thinking, I'm putting all this money in coffee, but I'm not putting any money at all in voluntarily safeguarding the planet, for generations to come, and something I'm deeply worried about. What if I put one coffee's worth of money into climate action a week, just as if I had a subscription to Netflix or Spotify, but one that was a subscription service that could help reverse climate change? And, as a nerd, I was, researching what is the impact. And it's about 150 trees a year planted internationally, as well as supporting over 20 or 5 other projects and all sorts of climate solutions. I thought, wow, imagine if the number of people who have a Netflix subscription had a subscription to this, for less money. And the mind boggles. And it's just like, well, that's billions of trees planted. That's like a third of the world's carbon emissions avoided or removed, just for pocket change. And so it's like, wow, we have to be able to show something that's valuable there. But the key thing is making the impact tangible. If that impact is just in a black hole in the 10,000 miles away, and you got like a PDF certificate, that's not enough. You have to be nose to nose with what you're doing. And so myself and my co-founder / wife, not in that order, we started Ecologi together, and she was an amazing designer, and I had this product-y background. And we wanted to create something that was just visceral, that was, inspiring, and you were just excited about, the actions that you took. And we had this kind of public virtual forest, and you can tap on the trees, and if some of your trees are in some of our partners, you get to see a particular photo of that tree that was planted when it's planted in the ground, and the species, and the what three words location of that tree, and believing, seeing is believing, and so that became our reason for being. And that, even though we've kind of moved away from the consumer side, more into the businesses and SMEs, the authenticity of what we're trying to do from a very human response to climate change. We're here, we're hopeful, but we're grounded. We're going to show you the impact. We're betting our own lives and our careers on making sure that you can have trust in us that we're going to do the right thing for the planet. And, the more we invest in those values, the better served we will be and continue to be.
First Mile is the UK's leading waste management service. We help over 30,000 businesses reduce their carbon impact with our award-winning range of recycling solutions. Go to our website, which is thefirstmile.co.uk, to get started today. If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to subscribe. We have brand new episodes every Wednesday. And this concept of laddering is interesting, because it's sort of, we talk about it in a similar way. Is, you can get someone to recycle, and then they might turn into a climate hero. And in the same way that you're sort of saying, buy a carbon credit, see the what three words of where the tree is, or where the well is, or the community that have been supported. As you're laddering up these things, what's the sort of the goal of that? Because are you building out solutions to say, actually, you can reduce your requirement for carbon credits because we've got all these other solutions for measuring your impact, working towards circular economies, or sustainable ways of running business? Is that sort of is the sort of carbon credit part of Ecologi step one?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really good way of framing it. It's a real entry point, and our responsibility is through education. So there's a real mixed amount of awareness as to how to actually tackle climate for your business. Some businesses have only heard of carbon offsets. Some businesses have never heard of carbon neutral. And so we're looking for those kind of easy on ramps, almost like step zero. The classic look at a climate journey is measure your emissions, make reductions, and then offset the residual amount. But lots of businesses aren't there yet. You need that step zero. What's that kind of like that hook? And so carbon credits is what we often get people and businesses interested in. That kind of gratification of funding something fantastic. But our responsibility is to educate, to say we're kind of moving away from the concept of the word offsetting and that neutral. You still have that carbon footprint. It's not gone anywhere. But you've done something that you should have done. You should have been helping fund these solutions over here. But now it's our responsibility to show you that kind of climate framework, all looping in all the good stuff that technology and, the best brands have been developing over decades now, where gamification and that kind of, reward and dopamine, as they call it, I think it's a bit exaggerated. But if we're going to apply that good stuff into the realm of like a climate journey framework, then we can move them along and sprinkle in little elements here and there.
Can you give us a potted history of carbon credits and where they came from and why we have them and why they've suddenly taken off in the last sort of 4 or 5 years?
Carbon credits have probably had the rockiest history of anything I could probably think of in terms of, what it sets out to achieve and what the perceived kind of impact it has been. There's some real ups and downs, and, it's a real roller coaster, and it will still be a roller coaster because there are so many limitations, and it's still a bit of a nascent area. We used to have just a handful of different standards, especially in the voluntary market, where companies are essentially, you're not told to offset their emissions, but they're just voluntarily doing it. And so, there are a few standards like Gold Standard and Verified Carbon Standard, and they've been around for maybe a decade or so. And what's happened over the last few years through the controversies, at the time, it's like, oh God, you've got to take a bit of an intake of breath when you see these controversies happen. But off the back of that, more layering up of additional verification and monitoring emerges from the ashes, essentially. And recently, Guardian, who I adore for all their climate reporting, they reported on carbon credits for preventing deforestation having an overall negligible effect. This is horrible for us. We know that nature has to be supported. You have to put money into nature to make it valuable. And then you got something out like this coming out. For us, we aren't particularly exposed because we fund the top 1% of any project that's out there. We review up to 200 projects a month. We have an internal expert team. We layer in all sorts of amazing recent technology layers that, satellite monitoring, computer vision, all sorts, as well as kind of other kind of desk-based research companies that allow additional inspection into what those projects are and deliver. But still, we're at the mercy as the kind of the headlines. The trouble is there's no middle ground. It's all or nothing. So the Guardian says, negligible impact for forest-based carbon credits. And then 4 weeks later, there was a headline from the Guardian saying we must urgently increase the amount of money going into forests to protect them. And it's just, and trouble is the middle line is really hard to get the airtime over.
The idea that there's a sort of why are they voluntary is the question. Second part of that question is, are there mandatory carbon credits around that exist as well? Do people have to do something in a non-voluntary way?
That's exactly it. There's a compliance market where, especially within the EU, there's the Europe emissions trading scheme, and then California got kind of cap and trade. It's the idea that high polluting industries, they have a certain allowance, and then anything over that, then they have to pay, and they're paying for a carbon offset as a way of mitigating their overall impact. And it's about the quality of the projects. The problem with the compliance market is that they're not so long as it ticks a box, they're happy for that to have been the achievement. In the voluntary market, that box ticking is not everything. It's all about how high quality were those projects that you funded. So the compliance market, there's a lot of funding of carbon credits out there, but there's no real pressure for the additional layers that I was just talking about.
And what about this debate that carbon credits is a complete sort of diversion of focus and money away from what we should really be doing, which is reducing the carbon footprint? And is that a polarized debate? Is that debate getting traction, or is it something that dying away and people are realizing actually that we do need these carbon projects? No,
it's a really good debate, and that debate should really war on. Is an opportunity to educate and to bring awareness where we already have the climate solutions. They're ready to be funded, or, there are ways of making businesses reduce their carbon footprint, but there's a big education gap. And so those debates are really helpful, and we'd welcome that, and I hope Ecologi would be at the vanguard or at the front, essentially, be able to say, yeah, they're really limited. It's part of a bigger climate strategy. We didn't set out as Ecologi just to fund climate solutions. We set out for Ecologi to help people and businesses genuinely tackle the climate and biodiversity problem. And so about 2.5 years ago, it's taken us forever to get there, but we've been working on our own kind of net zero tool. And so this is beyond funding high quality climate solutions, of course. This is measuring a business's carbon emissions. And so up until recently, it's been very expensive for a business to understand their carbon emissions because you have to have a carbon accountant, a consultant, and it costs thousands of businesses, even for micro enterprises. But leveraging technology, what we've done is we integrate with your accounting software, and every financial transaction is a paper trail of where your carbon emissions lie as a business. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and we combine it with carbon databases and one of the world's most amazing carbon experts. And we all provide something that is essentially free. When I came back from COP26 now, I was just like, wow, the urgency of climate is just beyond even my own comprehension. And it was just like, how about we change this tool, Ecologi Zero, for carbon footprinting for SMEs, and we just make it free. And so we're now working with membership organizations to kind of give this to millions of businesses. So it's really exciting, and it helps balance the kind of the carbon credit narrative. But often businesses will start with the credit, and then they'll be like, oh, cool, out of curiosity, what is my carbon footprint? Or vice versa.
Then with the net zero tool, then that's obviously going to calculate your carbon footprint, and if you wanted to offset it, I'm sure Ecologi would be delighted to work with you on that. but is it also giving businesses recommendations and help and different ways in which they could actively reduce the carbon footprint, by insetting, if you like, to use that technical term, to sort of, say if you did this, your carbon footprint would go down by this much, or is it just very much sort of analytical at this point in time?
Yeah, so it's both, as you say. We've got to even talk about stuff that we can't measure, and we're data oriented, but there's still a lot that's just still intangible, as the progress that have been made. But we still massive opportunities to educate, to sprinkle in opportunities. They were always looking for those opportunities. Very well about the opportunity of managing waste and recycling. Each of those is a part of our blog posts and knowledge base, so that when we identify certain information about a business, for example, certain businesses that we know that buy in materials, it could just be paper or it could be more kind of construction material, we can identify that and we can kind of surface more information about, how are you looking after the kind of the waste side of things there? Or, if we know a lot about their business in terms of, the amount of transport, saying 10% of your carbon emissions are locked up in air travel. If you switch that out with train or virtual, then your year-on-year target became 74% easier. So we want to make that kind of that dynamic recommendation, almost be this kind of internal environmental assistant for small businesses, essentially.
Do you think we're going to do it? I mean, there's debate now that we've been with the last few COPs trying to keep 1.5 alive, which is actually a survival mechanism. It's not actually. It's accepting that we're going to have 1.5 degrees of global warming. Do you think we can do that? There's some in the community saying that we should start to prepare for a warmer world and give up on 1.5.
It's like a little roundabout. I kind of go around on it in terms of, I am pragmatic optimist at heart. Very hopeful, and you've got to be reasonable though. That 1.5 degrees, we're on track to properly overshoot it. Lots of revolutionary moments are very unpredictable, and that's what gets me very excited. I think wind and solar is a really good example there. No one, even the biggest advocate, never expected that wind and solar would take off like it has. For example, just yesterday I saw the BBC reported that the majority of our electricity is coming from wind at the moment. No one really expected how quickly that could come around. And if you think about other revolutions, for example, society revolutions, like the workers' revolution in Russia with Lenin, and he said in his own lifetime he would never see the change that he had hoped that he'd be able to see, but we should try anyway. And then months within him giving that speech, it just kicked off an idea and it sparked something. And then the world responded to, a society and an economy responded to this idea. And then change happened completely unpredictably. And so there is this massive opportunity. We are not excited yet because we haven't seen these kind of huge flips, but these flips will come. We don't know exactly when. And that's why every single action counts. And so 1.5 degrees is, on life support, I think Antonio Gutierrez said. It seems unreasonable, but we have to shoot for it. And then when we shoot over it, then 1.6 is what we'll rally around, 1.7, because every fraction absolutely counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that. And it's sort of, again, it's about this sort of idea that it's a linear process to get there. And I think we're working towards, and actually getting businesses to commit towards a net zero status when they don't actually know what all of their tools are in their toolbox. So it's pretty scary for everybody. And on that, looking to the future, I mean, other emerging offsetting markets. So, we've talked about wells and stoves and trees and lots of great things, direct air capture. I mean, is there a lot of new technology or markets emerging from carbon offsetting and where these investments and money's being put?
Yeah, it's really exciting. And it's just overall amazing to see that this is the new biggest emerging economy, something that's great for the planet. And it's bonkers that even, when I started Ecologi in 2018, there weren't really many of us doing the sort of thing that we were doing at the time. But it's great to see that I'm in good company now and imagine what another few years has to offer. So it's really exciting. In terms of the climate solutions, there's a real magpie kind of syndrome with new climate solutions and early stage stuff. But that we shouldn't look past the kind of the ready to go opportunities and solutions that there are there. Reducing food waste, restoring forest, accelerating renewable energy and transition to clean transport and all sorts of things. There's the capacity for those projects is phenomenal, and they just need funding. And so, and they shall. Nascent technologies like carbon capture, their early days have limitation. We're really excited about biochar, which is essentially, burning biomass, that could be kind of like dead trees, kind of limbs and offcuts of certain natural waste, and then burning it in a way that doesn't release much carbon dioxide at all, but makes it very, very stable. It just leaves the carbon, and essentially charcoal really. And once you crush that up and you can kind of sprinkle it over agricultural fields, the carbon then is so inert that it will just sink for hundreds of years deep into the soil and then further and below. So it's a great way of storing carbon, but it also has this amazing ability to enrich and nourish farmland too. And so we're seeing much bigger opportunity in areas like that. This is really cool to see.
On this show, we're building a Hall of Fame for climate heroes, and we always ask our wonderful guests to leave something in First Mile's Climate Heroes Hall of Fame. So, what or who would it be?
So, Antonio Guterres is my climate hero. I've got many, but he's the Secretary General of the United Nations, if anyone didn't know. And what I love about him is just the kind of the cold, harsh truth in which he says it like it is. It's so refreshing to hear, someone in his position, very kind of corporate, say things like, we're on a highway to climate hell with our foot on this accelerator. Now that's just, someone from a very kind of business background to be able to tell it like it is really, really important. We're underestimating the climate crisis by a long way. He's also said, we have a choice, collective action or collective suicide. It's in our hands. I love that. It's not necessarily nice to hear, but I think it's so refreshing to be hearing from someone from the top.
Yeah, absolutely. It's telling us the way it is, and we should all listen. What's coming up in the future that you can share with us? I mean, it sounds like there's a huge amount going on there. You're acquiring a load of customers. I love your direct approaches. We just want to fund carbon capture projects, climate projects. So what are we seeing more of that, or are we going to be seeing a sort of a load of new exciting projects coming out of Ecologi?
Absolutely. So at Ecologi, we spread ourselves in lots of different places. And so I think we've got our enough irons in the fire in different areas, but we can't just help ourselves. And, any novel, interesting project that needs funding, just like the sorts of biodiverse projects that we just talked about, we're looking forward to putting on our impact shop so businesses can get behind them, more reasons to do it. Ecologi Zero, it's just come out of beta, which is this kind of carbon footprinting for SMEs. It's totally free, and we're just looking for more and more businesses to be using that. But we're working with partners, and we're hoping to bring that to millions of businesses. And what's exciting about this is that we have the opportunity of connecting businesses through their supply chain, which we're extremely excited about, the opportunity that can come from that. And so that's what we're looking at. Behind the scenes, though, we're still looking at the kind of the number of trees that gets planted every day. It's like 100,000 trees every day at the moment. And it's just staggering to think, I just came back from visiting a project, and understanding that impact is mind blowing, from the ground. So yeah, as long as we can keep finding reasons for businesses to, keep on upping the ante, that's what we're going to be guided by.
And what does success look like? I mean, it's hugely ambitious business, and sounds like more to come. And what does success look like for Ecologi?
When we first started, we had a little kind of giggle that, I hope that we could get 1 million trees planted. And now, at 63 million trees, and we do 3-ish a month now. And I'm looking forward to the 100 million and 1 billion. It's, there's a real scale. What I hope is just to be able to bring a certain percentage of businesses on the climate journey. If we can have, let's say, 1 million businesses all measuring their emissions and having science-based targets for their net zero journey, then that's real. That's some serious progress, and we'd love to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. So are you going to pick a number that we can come back to when we do a updated version?
Yeah.
$1 billion a month. That's
yeah,
large.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, our tree planting partner is looking to do 1 billion trees a day. And, we hope to be part of that. Is the numbers are staggering, but, there's a lot of reasons to be funding climate solutions at the moment. So we shall see.
There is, absolutely. Elliot, before we go, absolutely amazing to hear your story. Anything that you want to promote or plug or let our listeners know about, and definitely tell us where to find you and your website, because it's not the normal spelling of Ecologi. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's Ecologi with an I on the end instead of a Y. Thank you for pointing that out. Look, this whole thing has been a fantastic opportunity to tell a little bit about Ecologi. So I've wasted no more time, but come check us out. We'd love to see how we could help your business in any shape or form.
And the website's amazing. Loads of great information on there. So it's Ecologi, is it .com?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Ecologi.com. So it's all there. Elliot, been absolutely fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on First Miles Climate Heroes.
Bruce, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for peppering me with questions.
I'm Bruce Bratley, and you've been listening to First Miles Climate Heroes, where we meet incredible people making an impact to tackle climate change. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and subscribe to the show. We have brand new episodes every Wednesday.